Lord. I
Thank you.
mean, you ain't let nobody's ashy son get on your nerves. I know that.
Not in 2019 or beyond.
I heard you excited about your trip.
Girl, yes. I can't wait to just be breathing in Mediterranean air.
You better come back. You got three babies. You better come back.
And why ever would you say that?
Cause listen, listen. You better come back.
I have to because that's my offspring. But if we're not for offspring, I can't call it. I might just stay over there.
You staying in Spain? That's what we talking about?
Uh,
Krista said I should come back.
Huh?
Make sure I come back.
here
Hold
come
on.
here comes Sarah with the long hair.
Yes. Ooh.
My husband wanted me to know that Odell Beckham just got traded to Cleveland. Breaking news. Dun-dun-dun, dun-dun-dun. He upset about that thing. Y'all gonna stop laughing.
Poor
No,
Dave.
I can't.
He's a Cowboys fan?
No, he's a
A
Redskins fan,
Redskins
child.
fan?
Mm.
Oh, what?
I know. It's got to be love.
It must.
Redskins?
Oh,
It's got to be love.
Oh,
unconditional.
But he's got strong loyalties
I see.
to love the Redskins. That takes a lot. But
Mm.
Janine is frozen. She's stuck.
Am I back?
Oh, you're
your,
back.
your face was stuck in shock.
Like this. Wait, she was stuck with the MA.
Oh my god.
Not Maisha with the MA from 1997. Yes.
Maisha
Hilarious.
with the MA.
I'm Maisha. Maisha with the MA.
So Celinda hit me. She's not gonna be able to make it. She got caught with an impromptu meeting. So it'll just be us and whoever catches it. And if not, they'll catch it on the replay. But we gonna go ahead and just get this started. So hey guys, welcome back. Hope you guys have had a great week. I'm excited for this talk on speaking gigs because it's such a huge topic. And I did get the few forms that came back, like with the feedback, and I apologize. Like I legitimately put that form together in all its greatness, and thank God Kirsten let me know, like, yo, I don't see anything. I was like, wait, what? So and in truth, it just was gone. I don't know what's happening. It must be Mercury. I don't know, Mercury retrograde or whatever, but that junk was gone, gone, gone. I have no answers. So if you didn't get around to doing it, no big thing, but if you can go back and do it even after, I'm just curious as to where you guys are at. And again, like I did with the first one, if there's feedback for me to give, then I'll give you some feedback on what I read. But the two that I received, I feel are a good place to start. But yeah, tonight we doing this joint, me and Sarah. She has some great stories, and I really actually, if as long as she's cool with it, I want to start with her experience from last year, because I think it really speaks to what is just so very troublesome about being a woman of color on the scene, trying to rise in the ranks, of being a public speaker. And, you know, she got set up in a kind of cruel and unusual way. So I'm going to just kind of give it to Sarah to kind of kick off and, you know, lay the groundwork and talk about what that experience was. And then we'll take it from there.
So this is a safe space, so I will name the group. I was invited by the Q Labor Relations Conference to be their opening keynote at their event in September. Feels like a lifetime ago. And they specifically wanted someone to really come into them about diversity and inclusion, about microaggressions and bias, and how all of those things formulate and impact the workplace. So I put together my presentation, and I get up on stage, and leading up to the event, the group was great. I got a lot of good, suggestions and those sorts of things. So I had no reservations going into it. Then I get there, and the day before the event, they wanted to just huddle with me and talk about, what the content was going to be and how, kind of what to expect. And that's when I started to feel a little nervous, because one of the organizers says, and this is just like an experiment that we're doing, just, to see how this crowd will respond to something that's more in your face about diversity and inclusion, and how the group will respond to seeing something like that in a keynote space versus seeing something like that in a concurrent session. And I was like, did this motherfucker just call me an experiment? Like, excuse me, it's after this 8 o'clock. So, so that's why Janine brought me here. She knew that was coming. So, because you might have been the first person I called when I got off the stage. So, so here we go. Now it's time for me to get on. It's 8 o'clock, 8 a.m. on a Monday morning. I don't care who you are. Don't nobody want to talk about microaggressions at 8 a.m. on no Monday morning. Nobody, including my damn self. Like, nobody wants to have that conversation at that time of morning. But alas, here we are. So I get on stage. I'm doing my thing. The entire room is silent and completely uncomfortable, because I didn't come to play. Like, y'all want to talk about bias and microaggression. We're going to talk about bias and microaggression in all its uncomfortable glory. I'm not afraid to make people uncomfortable. So I'm probably 15 minutes or so into this 45 to 50-minute talk. And I am talking about why it is so, why it is an uncomfortable topic. I certainly understand that it is. I said, but I have personal difficulty understanding why it is so uncomfortable, because in the spaces that I occupy and the people that I associate with talk about these kinds of issues very, very freely. And from the right side of the room, this old white dude yells out, "You've got to be kidding me. What do you mean this is that you don't believe, that you don't understand why we're so uncomfortable? How dare you?" Did I mention I am on stage in the middle of my opening keynote, and everyone, like, you felt the collective room suck in their breath. Everyone waited to see what I was going to do, how I was going to react. Nobody looked at him. Like, everybody looked at me as though somehow I was in the wrong. It was one of the weirdest moments in my whole entire life. And so I quickly responded to him and I said, "Sir, I can understand why someone of your age and demographic would find conversations uncomfortable, because you're probably not talking about this very often in the spaces that you occupy. But since I do, I don't find it uncomfortable. And hopefully by the end of this conversation, you won't either." So he continues to just grumble and be disruptive. He stands up, he sits down, he walks around like very openly in the space. And no one pulls him aside. Nobody gets up. No one, goes over and talks to him and says, you're disruptive and either you need to exit or sit down and do what you're supposed to do. Nobody does anything. So I get to the part where I'm going specifically over the different types of microaggressions, and I make sure to point out him when I get to this part talking about microassaults. And I was like my friend here who had a privilegability meltdown and microassaulted me in the middle of my keynote session, and everybody laughed awkwardly. And that's when he got up and walked out, finally. So I get all the way to the end. It's over. And I come off stage. People immediately begin to tell me how great I did and how much they learned and all of that kind of stuff. And then applaud me for how well I handled him, how well I kept my composure. And I was just like, yeah, I thought it was strange that no one stopped him. Like, I thought it was strange that no one within the group went to him and said, that you need to sit down and be quiet. Like, nobody did that. And then they got uncomfortable and was like, well, we told you it was an experiment. And this is kind of, how it all went. So I got my check. And then there was a break. During the break, there were people who came up to me, talked to me. That was all normal. After the break was over, there was another keynote. Everybody goes back inside. I sat down right behind that motherfucker. And I just stared holes into the back of his head like I was daring him to turn around and say something to me. He moved for that whole entire hour, that whole second hour that he's there. He never flinched, never did nothing. So I waited until he left, and then I left. And I went back to my room, changed my clothes, and I just went to the airport. Like, I could have stayed and watched some other sessions. Kate Bischoff had a session that I was there long enough. I could have seen it before I had to go to the airport. I was just done. So, and then after it was over, fast forward like a week or so, I get a call from the conference organizer, Mike Vandervoort. Some of y'all know him too. And he is like prepping me for the feedback. He was like, we got all of our surveys back, and I just wanted to let you know, we're going to be sending these over to you, and some of the feedback is harsh, and but I don't want you to take any of that personally. You understand that we were trying something new, and I really appreciate the effort that you put forth in that, and I hope that in some of this stuff you'll find constructive criticism that you can use if you decide that you want to keep circulating the session. And he went on in just this like awkward spewing for probably a good 10 minutes. And I was like, so you sending this email or not? Like, okay. And he sends the feedback. It actually wasn't bad. Some of it was quite constructive. So, and then I had buku people, like a solid 25, 30 people, which Janine will tell you that's unusual, who reached out to me on LinkedIn, personal emails to say how much they enjoyed the session, that they really wanted, my speaker notes and those sorts of things. And I ended up getting a couple of leads that I've started to work for consulting type of work. So that was good. But overall, the experience of that particular event was traumatizing, and really has caused me to question whether or not being a speaker, particularly in the diversity and inclusion space, is something that I want to even do. It would be real easy for me to go more traditional HR and, give bullshit talks about how like changing diapers and getting my daughter to sleep through the night taught me how to better be a better manager of people and all the other fuck shit that people get on stages and say for thousands and thousands of dollars that don't actually result in anything tangible when they walk out the room and go back to work. So I don't know. I'm still on the fence. As it stands right now, all the gigs that I have lined up, ironically enough, if they are DNI related, they're related to women and pay inequity and male allyship and all. Like, everybody wants to hear about that, but don't nobody want to talk about Black shit and people of color shit. And so I'm gonna have to think about it some more before I decide if I want to begin pitching those kinds of sessions again and putting myself through that, because the what you go through in the moment of being on that stage and pressure, the energy of those sorts of spaces is so unbelievably heavy. People are so uncomfortable to start with. And then they're picking apart everything that you say because it is making them so uncomfortable. They're personally triggered in their own biases. And then they want to talk to you about, they just want to unload on you. Like, suddenly you become everybody's safe space for them to unload on you all of the racist things that they don't say to anybody, any other person of color that they know. I'm just not sure that that's the life for me. So I feel called and compelled to do it. It's something that I know I can achieve at if I commit. But yeah, it definitely is. It definitely is something that I'll have to really, really think twice about whether I will do that again. The other thing that I would add in terms of just being a speaker of color in general, and I know Janine will speak more about this, is the general fight that you have to have with organizers and event planners to be compensated at all, yet alone to be compensated adequately for what it is that you are bringing forth. I've been to several conferences where I have watched speakers who I absolutely know were paid more than I was joke about how they just did their presentation the night before, when I've been working for weeks to put something together. And I know that they're coming away with a bigger bag than mine is. And this idea that, well, that's just their negotiating skills, or, well, they got what they asked for, but whatever the nonsensical answer is that we tell ourselves or that other people tell us. I just don't believe that that's true anymore, particularly for those of us who occupy space in human resources. How dare you ask me to come speak to your groups about things like pay equity and creating inclusive workspaces, and not create an inclusive space for me and not pay me fairly. It is a slap in the face isn't even an adequate word to describe how bad that is. I'm just completely unwilling to tolerate that anymore. So I've walked away from a lot of offers, and I'm quick to ask up front, what is the compensation for this event? And I probably 2 years ago, 3 years ago, I probably would not have done that. 2018 changed all that for me. It is definitely, the bag matters. And I would definitely encourage all of you to be willing to ask for what you feel is appropriate, and then probably add 20% on top of that, because that's at least 20% on top of that, because that's probably far more appropriate. Like, people of color, women of color, we are always very conservative in what we ask for to begin with. So whatever it is that you're thinking is fair is probably 20% off, if not more. And I would absolutely encourage you to stand your ground on that and be unwavering in your demands for that, whether data supports you or that you have at your fingertips or not, because everybody else is getting that money. White women getting that money, men are getting that money, white men are getting that money, and they're showing up and on Tuesday, and they're doing their presentations on Tuesday night and standing on the stage on Wednesday morning and walking away with five-figure checks. I promise you. And that's just completely and utterly unacceptable. I'm never going to be that person, but I'm also not going to be the person who is afraid or apologetic or hesitant to ask for what I think is fair and appropriate ever again. And I'm not going to be afraid to call people out when I don't think that they're doing what they're supposed to do from a compensation standpoint. And I'm not going to be afraid to walk away from events when I don't think that they're doing everything that they can or should do. So that's my story.
Ooh, child, listen. Where to begin? I mean, I think the reason why I wanted Sarah to tell that story is because it's so pervasive. It happens so much. I think I spent definitely last year being mascotted, if you will, around the speaker scene, not without my own knowledge of it, but I certainly recognize that I had become the Black voice that certain players wanted at the table, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because they felt like I was safe enough, but also vociferous enough to say what it was. But they also wanted to manage that message and place me in a certain space. And I'll say this too, when you think people aren't watching how you're moving, they are absolutely watching how you're moving, because every time I stepped to a new stage or went to another city to speak, I was met with several people that we all know of the white delegation, basically ready to roast me on the road. It was almost like, why are you here? You weren't here 2 years ago. You weren't here 3 years ago. You weren't here 5 years ago. I'm annoyed that you have surpassed all of these people that are my friends and you're at this table. And so I found myself being the only Black woman at these tables, at these tech tables, at these HR tables, at just tables in general. And it was like, you could feel the air. It was thick. Like Sarah said, you just could feel like it was like, okay, well, yeah, you're kind of good at what you're good at, but like still, we're not used to having your kind at the table. And so whether you decide to insert yourself in the D&I space or some other space, just recognize that there's going to be some of that. Like, people like newbies, when they're the kind of newbies that they can mold and are kind of like, teach me your ways. Mm-hmm. When you're a person like myself and Sarah, who are kind of like, we'll watch people, we'll learn from you, but we're not about to fangirl over you, right? And we're going to make our way, make our lane. They don't much like that. It's like, why aren't you leaning on me more, Black woman? Why aren't you asking more questions, Black woman? Because I don't fucking have to, right? I just don't. And most of y'all aren't the example. To Sarah's point, there are way too many people that may look good to you on the stage, but behind the scenes, when you're on the speaker circuit, you're hearing on the ground at dinner, like, yeah, I just threw that shit together. They loved it. And that's the joke. And you, whoever it is that's the organizer, have, come out of pocket with money that you probably don't have to begin with to pay them, but you find it because they're Joe Gerstand, and I'm not saying he's one of them, but you know what I'm saying? Like, or, a William Tincup or whatever, because of the name, because it's built prestige. But these guys are literally recycling garbage year after year and bragging about it. and everybody's also happy. Yeah, we got a William Tincup. Oh, we got a Lori Rudiman. You know what I'm saying? And they're not doing the work. I can tell you with certainty that building a talk that people can buy into, there's a science to that.
Mm-hmm.
You don't just throw together a talk. I mean, you can, but if you really want it to, if there's a learning objective, and in our space and in a lot of spaces, there's usually a learning objective. They'll ask you that in the speaker proposal. What are the learning objectives for that specific talk? And those objectives in my head, I always tap into learning, how adults learn, how people learn, how my audience learns, whoever it is. If it's kids, then I'm going to tap into how kids learn, and I'm going to cater that talk around that. If it's adults, I'm thinking about that. Like, how do adults learn? How do they ingest information? And I cater that. When you just get up there and you start spewing stuff, it's not going to resonate, you know? But to that same token, speaking to the whole piece of how people rate you, that's a piece that I've learned that you can't take but too seriously. Mm-hmm. So what I've found is, just like a teacher or somebody that you look up to, people are going to either like you or they're not. Sometimes you get on that stage and they're like, ooh, where's she from? New York? Mm-mm. I don't even like her voice.
Yep.
I'm giving her a 1. I could get up there and I can kill my talk. But if I'm not for you, you're going to rate me low.
My very first session that I ever did at Louisiana SHRM, I still have it because I just wanted to always remember that moment. This stupid woman, her name actually is Helen, in Louisiana, who spent her entire form talking about why she didn't like my dress. My content was fantastic.
It was. I was there.
You were there.
Yep.
It was fantastic. She didn't think that shade of purple was what I should have worn. And she spent the entire comment section writing very large. She clearly took her time to print legibly to talk about my purple dress. And it's those sorts of things that when you're not prepared for that kind of stuff will absolutely just completely break you. So you just have to get thick in quickly, and you have to learn how to. There was, like I said, even with the feedback from that session in Minnesota, there was legitimate feedback in that I definitely will take and tweak that session. I got great feedback. The session that I did in Alabama, Jasmine was there. That session, I got really good feedback. There were also people who did not like my dress. My shoulders apparently should not be out in Alabama. That's an issue. Yeah, my shoulders were an issue. So I have great shoulders. Fuck all y'all. They're going to be out. Now I can't say nothing about what's going with these triceps and these forearms, but yes, okay, I have great shoulders. I rock them. They see the sunshine more than any other thing whenever that's possible. So yeah, the Christians did not like the shoulder. My dress was red and the shoulders were out. They were up, set in the Bible Belt. Yes, I'm a harlot and
happy about it.
And happy about it.
Happy harlots we are.
Happy harlot #. Yes.
Well, I mean, to that point though, it's like, I think there's something to be said here about being true to who you are. I firmly, I take this thing from this man I met, this Mo Gadot guy, former chief business officer for Google, Egyptian man, very smart. And he literally told me last year at one of the conferences, he said, Black people of color, but Black people namely in the US perplex me. He said, because you guys have more power than you realize, in that if you all just showed up exactly as you are, people would have to accept it. but instead you dumb yourselves down over and over again, and you regress towards the mean, which is white. And because you do that, you end up where you're at. He's like, where we are in Egypt, you know, we rise. He goes, in most other places around the world, you watch the diaspora, they rise. I remember working with this woman in South Africa, and she had come here because her husband was a scientist at my last job. And I forget something was going on here of a racial nature. And she was like, oh, y'all are bugging. What kind of Black people are y'all? She's like, in South Africa, we would have been protesting. We would not be at work. There's no friggin' way we would, you know? So it's interesting. I share that because I find it always interesting when I speak to Black people outside of the US, what their perspective is on how we show up. And so, you know, as you're thinking about how you're going to show up as a speaker, I encourage you to come out as yourself. Like, you know, initially for me, I think I was trying to make myself into something acceptable. I'll be honest about that, because I didn't really know how much of myself I could bring to the stage. So for a while, I was just kind of playing with some things. The last year, I was like, you know what? I'm tired of the crap. Y'all gonna get these natural curls. Y'all gonna get this New York accent. Like, you're gonna get all this Janine, because this is who I am. And whereas I was concerned about how that would be taken, it actually resonated. So, you know, when you talk about like, how do I bring more enthusiasm to my talks, or how do I get people to buy into me? You just bring you. And I think if more of us enter the scene, and we enter our scene exactly as we are, you know, straight hair, if that's what you into, dreads, they will have no choice but to accept that that's what it is, because they need us. No time soon are they going to just say, hey, we're not inviting you to these things. They need us. Even the white people are tired of seeing white people. True story. Not all of them, but white people are tired of seeing white people. Just today, I had a talk. I met up with somebody I'd worked with years ago. Didn't much like her, white woman, Jewish. And she had been at my talk for Sherman, Long Island last week. And she was like, I have to tell you this, and I hope you take it the right way. She was like, you with Steve Levy, she's like, we could have done without the old white man. She goes, that was all you. That was all about you. You killed it. You dominated it. That was all you. Nobody was there for him. And she's like, it's not just me. It's, you know, a lot of people were saying that. And so it was just illuminating for me, right? I mean, it was humbling for sure, but it illuminated the fact that even white women are tired of seeing white guys, or white people are just tired of seeing white guys. The same happened when I spoke at Connections last year for Ultimate. They had asked me to moderate a panel for the women in leadership. That was a battle. Nobody knew that but like Sarah and Kirsten, because I was talking to them behind the scenes. But they had come to me in December of 2017 and asked me to moderate a panel of white women. And I was like, are you bugging? You're bugging. Like, you can't be serious. Not because a moderator role isn't as important. I understand the importance of that role. But I was like, after everything happening out here in the world, you can't be serious about asking me to take that role where I just give the platform to white women. I said, I won't do it, but you can find another way for me to be involved. I said, I'll sit on the panel. And then they kind of schmoozed it over. I thought I was good by being there, at least me. And then I had Jason Lauritsen come in as the moderator. I said, well, let's throw a man in there. Cool, fine. Well, we got on stage, and these two older white women were like, so is anybody going to talk about the fact that there is only one Black woman on this panel? And why is there a white man here? And like, there's been white people all day. And I'm like, and I'm looking at Des Picaro and McCole, and they have gone like white at this point. And I'm like, so y'all want the real deal? Because apparently that's what y'all came here for. So let's talk. So it's like, initially they asked me to moderate. I wasn't having that. And they're like, well, why? What's wrong with moderating? I said, because I'm a Black woman and I deserve a role. And I went for the role I wanted. I wanted to be able to speak. The moderator, I have to drive the conversation. It's not my playing field, right? So I went for the role I wanted. Well, this Filipino woman goes crazy. Why does everything have to be about race? Race, 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 race. I'm so sick of it. And my kid, you know, they're mixed race, they're white and Filipino, and they didn't get into the school of their choice. And they're getting, you know, these Latinos are getting in ahead of them. And I mean, she went off. And I was just like, are you done? I'm sorry that that's your experience. But there definitely is something called racism. You're about my skin color. It's a good time that you realize that this is a real thing. But if you can't, that's cool. But this is what we're here to discuss. We're not going to like overlook that. We're going to have a real discussion about it. And she huffed and puffed for the rest of that session. I mean, she was just not pleased with me. So again, it was like nothing I said on that stage was going to matter. I was getting a low rating from her. And if I was going to hang my hat on the fact that I was going to actually walk out of there with a better rating, I just wasn't, right? It didn't rub her right. It wasn't what she wanted to hear. And you have to understand that sometimes when you're out there as a speaker, you're not there. You're there to be a catalyst. You're there to be a catalyst. Everybody's not going to love it. If you get 5 people in the room that love it, tip your hat and be happy with it and keep it pushing. Maybe it'll be more next time. I've been happy in the moments when I've gotten on a stage where there was nothing but white folks, but there were like 5 Black women in the audience. And this happened to me last year in Orlando. I spoke for a bank trainers conference. Whitest conference I've ever been to in my life. I mean, Midwest, white. But there were a few sprinkles of Black women there. And they came up to me after my session. They were like, girl, you have made us so proud. We have never really ever seen anybody that looked like us here in this space. We were just so happy you were here. And then you just did us so proud by being here and just showing up in the way that you did. And I was like, you know what? I don't even give a crap if the rest of those people didn't like me. I was there for those women, right? Because I proved to them that we can do this. We exist. We're not like unicorns, you know, that live in some fairy tale land. So I've gotten used to making those impressions. I don't give a shit about whether white people like what I have to say. Rate me low. It matters in a sense, because it's like, well, if you want to be called back by that conference, maybe they're not going to call you back again. So what? Find another event. It's like you have to truly treat it like a continuous learning thing. It's something you get better with in time. You're not going to just, I mean, some people are just naturally charismatic and they know what it is. But like, if you're just deciding, actively deciding, like, I'm going to be a speaker, you have to be dedicated to some sort of process, right? I didn't have timing down my first few talks, you know, like I had to play with it and figure out what a 45-minute talk looked like, or what an hour talk looked like, or what it looked like to give a 3-hour workshop. You figure it out. And sometimes there were times where I ended up ending a little bit earlier than I needed to. Whoops. Okay. So I make sure I don't do that next time, you know? So like, one of the hacks I'll do now is I'll create my talk and then I'll talk it out on like Evernote, just so that I get in a realm of figuring out, okay, like how long is this actually, you know? And it also helps me to hear myself too, because we all have like those idiosyncratic things. I have it, I'm sure you have it too, that you just say, you know, like they're just those things that you say that you don't really want to say, but they're like filler words. So those things you get to work out. If you record yourself and you hear it, then you can start to kind of work out those kinks. But I used to be hard on myself for those things too, until I really started listening to other people talk. And I was like, well, they got some idiosyncratic stuff too. They're doing the ums and the, you know, whatever that is. And so I said, okay, but they're getting paid 10 grand, you know, to Sarah's point, like they're getting 10 grand, they're getting 15 grand and all this other stuff for lackluster stuff with filler words. So I'm like, well, maybe I need to ease up on myself about, you know, how much pressure I'm putting, but it's continuous learning. I've gotten better. If somebody saw me back in, I don't know, 2012 doing a talk, I was decent, but I'm far better now because I have more confidence and I've learned to talk about things that I'm passionate about and I know a lot about. That helps. When you know your material well, then you're going to get up there and kill it. When it's something foreign to you, good luck. You know, you're going to spend a lot more time trying to get comfortable with the material, and it comes across on the stage when you're not comfortable. So if there's any advice to give, really, really think about those 2 to 3 topics that you can own, that you know a lot about, that you have an opinion on, that you have something to say, and really start, you know, formulating some signature talks around it. So, I mean, that becomes important. It's not just about putting out proposals, which is an art in and of itself, but it's also just having like a few signature talks under your belt so that that's what you become known for. So, and, you know, as you go on, you start to just kind of amass signature talks. Like when I first started and I would speak to public speakers that were already out there, I'm like, dang, they got like 10 signature talks. You know, like, when am I going to have that sort of content? But you get there in time. And as you get feedback from people, you start tweaking things. Like, you'll have people just say like, oh, she had way too much on her slide. Okay, I'll put some more pictures next time. You know, then you put some pictures and they're like, oh, I wish it was much more informative. All right, back to some more content. Let me find some equilibrium here, you know. So
that was my favorite comment out of Minnesota. I always pick, you know, one hater comment. That was my favorite. That all I had to offer was gifts and my own bias.
Ooh.
He thought hard about that.
Right. Yeah. It's just, you really just have to find, you know, your niche and own it, and be thick-skinned enough to take the criticism, take what works, what makes sense, what resonates, and throw away the rest. As far as payment is concerned, for me, I found myself doing a lot of unpaid stuff initially, to get practice. So that's okay. If you've never stepped on a stage and you get an opportunity to speak at a church, go speak at that church, right? And use those references and use the experience. If you get an opportunity to speak for a nonprofit and you've never stepped on a stage, use those experiences. It will lead you to money. But once you get a few under your belt and you're feeling pretty confident, it's time to start charging. And I put in the work, you know, the whole 500 to 1,000 band. None of y'all on this phone call should ever be charging 500, unless it's an organization that you love and respect, and that's all that they can give you. And if that's comfortable with you, then go ahead and take it. But if you're dealing with an enterprise client, and when I say an enterprise client, I'm talking about a client that can pay, a client that has money, moolah, there's not one of y'all on this call that should ever be charging 500, let alone maybe even 1,000. So in the speaking lane, they actually regard you based on what you charge. So if you're charging 500 to 1,000, they're assuming that you're new to this. Like you're not even, you know, somebody that's like out there and known. When you start getting 2,000 to 5,000, you're still even looked at as, okay, you may have a few years under your belt, not much, but you got a little something under your belt. You start getting 5,000 to 8,000, now you're talking like expert. You're an SME in your lane, right? 10,000 is usually like, and above, that's usually your keynotes, or anywhere from 8 to 10,000 and above. That's like your keynotes, and or you got a book, you're an author. Which brings me a whole nother thing. One of the things that I was told by several white speakers when I stepped on the link was, when are you going to write the book, Janine? Janine's not writing the book because I'm not ready to write the book. It's there, it's being written, but I'm still living it. So no, I don't. Well, you know, in order for you to ever get 10,000 and above, you know, you're going to need a book. Says who? Says what? So it's not true. Like, for instance, I don't know how many of y'all know Ron Thomas, but Ron Thomas has been getting over 10 grand. He ain't got no book. Not a book, not even an ebook. He ain't got a book. He ain't got a chapter. Okay. And he was one of the first people, like, when we would talk about speaking gigs, and I said, oh yeah, I think it was a few years ago. And I was just like, yeah, I don't think I'm at the point where I can charge 10 grand. And he said, why the hell not? I said, oh, cause I'm not quite ready for keynote. I haven't really, I'm still kind of getting my chops. And he's like, bullshit. You ready for a keynote and you ready for that 10 grand payday. You just need to ask for it. And I was like, so, to Sarah's point, it just speaks to how, as women, and mainly women of color, how we really just downplay our worth all the time, and we won't risk it. And it really was after that talk I had with him, one of the first clients that I had gotten, I said, you know what? I'm about to just double my rate. I'm going to just double it from what I told them. And I've been doubling my rate every year with this particular client. They never tell me no. It's, like, they just don't. And they could, but they have it. They're like $1 billion client. So they got it to give. But if you don't ask for it, they're not going to tell you like, oh yeah, here's 10 grand for you to have. They'll do that with Amber. They're not about to do it with Jasmine. They're not going to do it with Janine. They're just not. They're going to wait for us to ask and see if we're smart enough. If we're the smart Black women that are going to ask for that kind of stuff. They don't just offer it up. It's the same thing. I mean, we'll talk about PR the next time around, but it's the same thing with campaigns. People come to me all the time. Hey, we'd like for you to be the spokesperson or be the influencer on this campaign. They will never talk money up front, ever. We want A, B, C, D, E, F, G. And I'm like, oh, that sounds great. That's wonderful. And your remuneration for this is, and they're like, well, what would you charge? Oh, okay, now we talking. But then very rarely do they come to the table and say, hey, we're going to pay you this. It's taken me almost 8 years now to get clients that are coming to me with, hey, what is your charge? Versus, oh, well, we can't, or, oh, we can only afford like $500 or whatever it is. Like, no, come correct. And if they're not coming correct, you need to be able to come to them and say, yeah, that's not going to work for me, So, I mean, there's a balance. I can't tell you exactly what that balance is going to be for you, but there is a balance between doing some stuff for free initially and working your way up to the paydays. But I would encourage you, I would say at this point, ask for anything. I don't, what's your budget? That's always my first question now. What's your budget? If it's a marketing campaign, what's your budget for this? And then I'll package them out based on whatever they tell me. But I'm never going to give you all of what you can get out of me for like this much. We're just not going to do that. Like, I have a client that I'm working with now, and they wanted sponsored shows, and they wanted tweets, and they wanted LinkedIn posts and all these things. And I quoted them for them, and they're like, oh, well, we're a small business. Now, there are 2 other influencers that are working with them. Megan Bureau is one of them, and Tim Sackett, that we all love here, right? I can guarantee you, and I've heard, he gets at least $5 grand for his campaigns, but we're a small business and we can't manage it. So I said, okay, cool. But what you're going to do is give me half of what I asked you for, and you're going to get less. This is what I can give you. So I just made it work for me and made it so that they still had to pay me. And they were like, okay, we can't refute that. But you got to be constantly in a perpetual state of just stating your worth and renegotiating. And sometimes when the renegotiating goes on for too long, you got to be chill with just walking away from it. It's probably not the client for you. You know what I'm saying? Like, I can't do nothing for you. I thank you very much for being interested in working with me, but I don't think there's a synergy here. And we just got to do that unapologetically, but they will try the okey doke. They do not think that we are worth what we say we're worth. You will tell people your price, and they will scoff at it at times and say, well, I don't understand why you're charging so much. It's because you're Black. It's because you're a woman of color. It's not because it's unreasonable. It's because of what skin you're in. And you just have to know that that's what it is and keep it pushing until you find, the right opportunity that's aligned with what, you want and what you're capable of getting. And truthfully, it's the balance between the speaking gigs and the PR you get, like, that brings up your influence factor, right? So it's one thing to be talking and be out there speaking and doing gigs. It's a whole nother thing when you can say, I'm Sarah Morgan and I'm a contributor for Black Enterprise. Boop. I'm Sarah Morgan and I've been in Black Enterprise and I've been in all these other. Blue, I'm Janine Truitt and I've been in Entrepreneur, Forbes, Fast Company, holla at me. Yeah. So now you got to pay, right? Because Amber and them, they ain't been in nan one of those publications. They ain't been in HBR. They can't say that, right? They ain't been in Network Journal. They ain't been in Newsday several times where the source calls them up on the regular. So that's why next week I find it important to talk to y'all about PR, because when you get those spots, even if it's a one-liner, it's yours forever. That SEO will pay you forever. And when you go and you apply to these things and you have to give them a bio, it brings your cool factor way up. It shouldn't be that way. We can all sit here and talk about why it shouldn't be that way, but it is what it is. And so I'm going to continue to encourage y'all to really put some work into your PR. It's not just the blogging's cool. That's cool. Tweeting, all that's cool. But if you can get a source to get you in or get a soundbite in or one of those big podcasts to feature you or whatever the case is, you're off to the races. You get 5, 6, 7, 8 of those and you keep amassing those over the year. You ain't got to be a Kim Kardashian to get on a big stage. You ain't got to be an Oprah or anybody like that. People are going to be checking for you because of the prestige that comes behind those brands. So it's really about how it's timing, it's you being poised to enter the scene, and it's how you're positioning yourself. For all intents and purposes, I'm a work at home mom with a small business. Shouldn't nobody really care what I have to say, but I've been written up in all these publications. People care a whole lot now because I'm seen as an authority, on this. This has never been a time when it's been like that. Usually when you see those kind of publications, it's like, oh, I'm the VP of blah, blah, blah for JP Morgan Chase, or, I'm the chief diversity officer for Apple. It's a unique time where you can be none of those things and still get a soundbite in one of those platforms and be killing it out here. And everybody's like, ooh, Janine Truitt, ooh, Sarah Morgan, like, you got to work the system. There's just no denying it. And it brings up your money. Like, as soon as Sarah got the Black Enterprise, she was like, it's going in the bio.
All my rates is going in the bio. Listen,
right.
my first byline dropped. I changed all my profiles and my entire rate changed. You got to play these Black Enterprise rates now. Thank you very much. Yes, all my rates changed. I had clients and people that I was talking with potentially before that. And then after that, my first feature interview, that microaggression piece dropped. And then the one on Me Too dropped a couple weeks after that. And they were like, oh, yeah, we saw that. We think we might want to have you come in after the first of the year. I was like, oh, thanks for calling. My rates went up. You're going to play these good Black Enterprise rates now. Yep. Yes, you are. Yes, you are.
Indeed, and I mean, we'll talk about like media kits and all that kind of stuff. But I mean, I guess the main thing to just say is speaking for me has been a huge driver for my business. So if your intention is to have a business or to consult, it's a really great way, as long as you have the heart for it and the chops for it and the stomach for it, to get out there and have people, see you, hear your thoughts. And ultimately, it's like by proxy, they want to patronize your business. It's like as soon as you get up there, as long as you're saying all the right things, you're bound to walk away with some people that are like, hey, can I talk to you? It's just easy peasy. It's getting there. It's coming up with the talks. It's getting through the whole speaking process and getting that buy-in. But once you're there, it does a whole lot for you. But, you know, for us, we've got to have thick skin. You got to have thick skin, and you kind of got to stick with it, and you got to find what's comfortable for you, and make some decisions. Like Sarah said, she's not sure if she's going to stay in the D&I lane, and I don't blame her. I'm there, and it has taken an emotion. It took an emotional toll on me last year. It did. Because it wasn't just what I did on the stage and what I had to endure from the stage. It was the aftermath. It was the offside conversations where people wanted to talk to me about their racist ways and their, you know, how they felt about what I said and all these different things. And it was just a lot. It's one thing to live it. It's another thing to have to teach people about it. It's a whole nother thing to have to kind of ingest people's perceptions of what you put out there. It really is a lot. So, you know, and then too, people are just fascinated to see us on the scene at all. It's like watching an exotic animal almost to them, you know, wow. You know, I can't tell you how many times it's like, wow, well, what is exactly that you do? Oh, you own a business. Oh my God. Well, wow. Like, how did you do that? How'd you start that? They're just so fascinated that we're here in this juncture, in this space and time, building businesses and getting on stage, big stages, and talking about meaningful things and speaking about it intelligently. They're not that damn smart. I'm just gonna throw that out there. Please just understand, because we've all grown up with this sort of conditioning that it's almost, and even if your parents didn't say it, it was unspoken that white people are smarter. They just are. They're the ones, that's why they got the money. That's why they move up in society. They are not. They are not smart. Not most of them anyhow, right? The kind of things that I've gotten called in to for client work, or the kind of questions, I'm like, and you got a Wharton what? And you went to NY where? And you went to UMich? Somebody paid for your degree. That's what happened, because that don't make no damn sense. They're just not that bright. And I know that's probably not the nicest thing to say, but I think it's an important thing to say, because we are that smart. We are that smart, and we ought to start walking around with the sort of confidence that we are that smart, and throwing the middle fingers up, because we really are. Just much better sense. And because we've had to work for what we have, you know, there's just, it's just, we take this much more seriously. To Sarah's point, like, I rehearse and rehearse. I put my stuff together for months. Like, I work at this. There's no possible way I would ever throw something together for a client and be happy with that. That is privilege. Nothing more than privilege. It's like, I know I'm going to be here. Even the talk I just did with Sherm, Long Island. I love Steve Levy. He's a friend of mine. We've been friends for years. But this guy showed up late to our gig. They were looking at me like, where is he at? I'm like, I don't know, right? He shows up with like jeans, like these like messed up, mashed up jeans, you know, this regular schmegular shirt, shows up with his wife. And his excuse as to why he's late is, oh, my stove, something was going on with my stove and my wife wasn't happy. And if she's not happy, I'm not happy. And so, my dude, where on the planet can a Black woman or Black man show up to a speaking gig with that spiel and not have people giving you the side eye? I literally was looking at him like, you can't be serious right now. And he didn't apologize for it. He just sat down, and he just sat down with this cool confidence and started talking about shit circa the 80s. And as it were, like I said, it didn't resonate even with his peer group. They were just like, okay, cool. You know, so it's an opportunity for us to show them what real work looks like. As long as you're dedicated to doing it, it's an opportunity, because they're not willing to work. Not most of them. They've gotten so cemented in the fact that they are offered these things. They don't have to do anything for it. They just get it. Whereas we have to work for it. And it's like, once we work for it and we're there, everybody wants us back eventually, because it's real shit. It resonates, it comes through, it hits, and that's the opportunity. So there's like so much, like I could do like a whole boot camp, I feel, on like how to put proposals together, and like what makes for a successful proposal, and like just how to put together the composition of a good talk. Like, I mean, we could go on and on and on. And maybe if that's something you're interested in, then maybe we'll do that at a later date. But I think this was just like a good basis to just talk about like what you're facing as you enter this lane. But with this group, just know that you have support. You have people here that are out here, that we're doing it, and we see what it is. Like, you've got questions. If you're nervous, ask, hey, can you talk me through this? I know Trish, she's not on right now, but she did her first speaking gig like earlier in January, and she was like, sis, I am nervous. Like, what do I do? How do I put this together? And we talked about it, and like, this for me is why TT Power Circle is so important, because these white people are not trying to educate us. They don't give a crap. They have their cliques, and they're going to disseminate that knowledge among themselves. They're not looking out for a Janine Truitt. They're not looking out for a Sarah to say, hey, let me pull you up and let you know, like, put you up on game. Like, they don't care. So if they don't do it, who's going to do it for us? Like, we've got to start to knowledge transfer and stop this nonsense of hoarding information when we know what it is, and we can make it better for the next people coming up. Like, I'd rather tell you that than see you go through the same shit again. Me, personally. I know there's a delegation of Black women that feel differently, like, nah, you got to go through the initiation. You got to work your way. No, if I can make it easier for you to know how this works, then I'm happy. Everybody doesn't need to go through this. So that's the spiel. That's my soapbox for tonight. I hope this was helpful. Good. Yep. So, ooh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I feel cathartic. I feel like this was cathartic. Oh, you're welcome. You're so welcome. So this is the last one before I take a break. We won't have a session next week because I'll be taking off. But I think it's a good time, to kind of go back into the drive and look at some previous stuff or catch up, whatever it is you need to do, feel free to do that. And then when I get back and I'm good and jet lagged, please just have pity on me. I'm gonna be jet lagged. We'll talk about PR, and that session is going to be visual because I do want to show you what the components of a good pitch look like, so that when you decide to pitch, whether you're pitching cold or you're pitching through something, you kind of know how to hit it and hit it quick. And that way you can kind of practice doing that and seeing how far you go, because PR is important. You'll have to do it for yourself initially, because ain't nobody got money to be hiring a PR agent, not namely me yet, but we'll get there. So, all right, ladies, thank you. I will see y'all on the internet. Bye.